Hello everyone, I'm Joanna, and on behalf of the Singapore Global Network, I would like to thank everyone for joining us at our second edition of the Finance Venture Series. This event is proudly brought to you by the Singapore Global Network and UOB Asset Management, and we are really excited to present this event to you live from our studio. This evening, we're expecting about 1,000 members of our global community from over 50 different locations joining us. This is a perfect example of what we try to achieve at the Singapore Global Network, which is to grow a global community of Singaporeans and friends of Singapore. As a member, you're part of our 66,000 strong global network and can look forward to a suite of professional and social events, updates on the latest opportunities in Singapore, and having exclusive access to Singapore resource guides and promotions. For today, we are happy to present to you the Finance Venture Series, where we offer a distinctive outlook on the finance landscape in Singapore and the region, through perspectives of industry experts and thought leaders. Each episode will feature distinguished business leaders from the finance sector and hosted by a member of our global community. If you're keen to participate in our industry events, please stay tuned for our upcoming Finance Festival in May, where we'll be bringing together over 20 companies for talks and panel sessions by top government and industry leaders and to showcase hiring opportunities. Today's episode is all about digital transformation of the banking industry. With the rise of mobile payments, many of us enjoy the convenience of going cashless and being able to make transactions at our fingertips. We also see the emergence of digital assets like cryptocurrencies and new players in the industry. To share more insights on how technology has disrupted the traditional financial industry, we are pleased to jointly organize today's talk with UOB Asset Management, a Singapore-based asset manager with significant local presence across Asia and a wholly owned subsidiary of UOB, a leading bank in Asia. Both UOBAM and UOB have readily adopted new technologies in their processes and offerings to be at the forefront of digitization in the industry. Today, we are very honored to have with us on our panel Mr. Thio Boon Kiat, Group Chief Executive Officer of UOB Asset Management, Mr. Kelvin Lam, Head of Tomorrow and Group Digital Banking for UOB. For those who may not be familiar, Tomorrow is UOB's mobile-only app with the full suite of banking solutions targeted at the digital generation. Finally, our moderator, Ms. Wee Jia Ying, co-founder and Chief Operating Officer of CloudWall Capital. Jia Ying is a former overseas Singaporean who has spent many years in Hong Kong before returning to Singapore last year. Interestingly, Jia Ying had also pivoted from private banking to blockchain in her transition to Singapore, and we'll be sharing more of her personal journey with the audience shortly. For our excited audience, we would like to share that you are able to participate interactively with our show through asking your questions via Pigeonhole. Just scan the QR code that appears on screen and head over to www.pigeonhole.at and enter the passcode 2503. The Q&A segment will be right after the main segment of our show, so do stay tuned to that. Without further ado, let me now hand over the time to Jia Ying.
Thanks, Joanna, for the introduction. Before we begin, I want to give a big shout out to SGN and also UOB, for taking your time, for this event and organizing this whole thing together from a team. Thanks to all of you who are attending it today as well with us on a Friday afternoon. Similar to all of you, I was at SGN living in Hong Kong for the past 8 years and recently relocated back with my family to Singapore. It's an absolute privilege to be with you today, and thank you for having me. I'm really glad this afternoon to have Boon Kiat and Kevin on this panel. So Boon Kiat, Kevin, would you like to tell us a bit more about yourselves?
Sure. Maybe I'll get started because it's probably shorter and more boring. My name is Boon Kiat. I'm the CEO of UOB Asset Management Group. I've been with UOB Asset Management for almost 3 decades now, having joined from GIC. And I suppose I grew through the ranks at UOB Asset Management, joining as an investment manager, moving up to head of global equities, thereafter to a CIO, and where I am to the CEO of the company. Maybe what's a little bit more interesting, other than this rather boring background, is why I've remained at UOB Asset Management and UOB for like 3 decades now. It's probably it's got a good culture, I think, good experiences, and it's a culture of collegiality, teamwork. And I think having been with the group for so long, it gives us the opportunity, and for me personally, also professionally, to grow, learn, and develop also. So that's my short career, my career in a nutshell, not short. And outside of work, I like all things football, too old to play it now, but watch a lot. And maybe for the purposes of, maybe more pertinent to today, I enjoy all things technology.
Oh, very good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Kevin.
And Kevin?
Thank you. My name is Kevin Lam, and I've been with the UOB group for 17 years now. The last 10 of those 17 years was outside of Singapore, with UOB Malaysia first, and then with UOB Indonesia. I'm Singaporean, and I started with UOB in Singapore, first running the loans portfolio here. And when I went to Malaysia, starting in consumer banking, but subsequently taking on the role of Deputy CEO for UOB Malaysia. And when I went to Indonesia, I was the CEO of our UOB Indonesia franchise. I am also, very somehow, involved in technology over the last 20, 30 years that I've been working, and starting from working in whether in the US, in Hong Kong, or now subsequently in Southeast Asia. Technology somehow has always been intertwined with finance for me, and hence, I find myself, after doing kind of like conventional banking as a country CEO for UOB Indonesia, back in this role doing UOB Tomorrow Digital Bank in the last 1.5 years.
That's exciting. So, Kevin, I think from your perspective, with the rise of Asia millennials, right, what do banks like UOB need to do to pivot and position yourselves accordingly for this new growth segment?
Yeah, we see that many of the behaviors of our consumers over the last 5 to 10 years has transformed a lot. Whether you go from things like consuming music, from getting their food, getting their transport, getting their holidays, right, consuming their news, even consuming banking and finance, right, has changed a lot. And the mobile phone, right, which was just invented, in the way that it is about 15 years ago, has really transformed our lives. And in banking, it's no different. I think we now in the banking space really put a lot of emphasis on how do we digitize the products and services that we have. But more than just the digitization, we're looking at the end-to-end customer journey to try and build a customer experience that is actually simple, engaging, and transparent to our consumers. So this is basically a journey that I think UOB has been on for the last 5 years especially, when we set out a separate strategic business division to do a standalone digital bank in Southeast Asia, and we got the name Tomorrow, TMRW, without all the vowels, by the way. It's straight to the point, building a digital bank targeted at the millennial generation. But I must add that in the last 1 year, since COVID has come in, this digital generation has expanded beyond just the millennials. People that are more mature, I should say, and more affluent. We found that this COVID has accelerated digitalization by 5 to 7 years at least. And hence, we've merged our younger segment with the more mature segment with this new app called UOB Tomorrow. And we're looking to target the entire spectrum of customers across all the 5 markets of ASEAN.
That's so exciting. So, Boon Kiat, I think from your perspective, are your clients also gearing their interest in digital product investment solutions? And what is UOB Asset Management's strategic direction to achieve this?
Well, I think a short answer to you, most definitely yes. There's certainly no question that digital disruption is now very central to the asset management industry. In fact, I'll also venture to say that any asset manager unable to rise to the digital challenge will find it very hard to stay competitive in the long term. For UOB Asset Management, in developing our digital solutions, we seek to align 3 key dynamics that drive the industry, at least in my view. The first is that we believe that wealth management, just like Kevin was mentioning, is no longer the preserve of the private banks and the investment banks. There has been a very profound shift in recent years towards extremely low cost, low barrier investment services. And allow me maybe just to do a little bit of plug as an illustration. By offering one of the industry's lowest entry points, just $1, through our digital platform, UOB AM Invest, we actually aim to democratize wealth management. So for us, this means offering ordinary individuals like you and me, families, SMEs, access to institutional grade portfolio services, but without any of the institutional type minimum amount and charges. The second dynamic is also, again, Kevin alluded to this, a greater aware in financial planning and all things finance. We acknowledge that today's 20 and 30-year-olds are planning way ahead for their financial futures in a way not seen in our generation, I guess. And they want to achieve a good work-life balance, run their own businesses, be financially independent, and I think importantly, retire early. So they are now also much more digitally savvy and environmentally and socially conscious. And for me, I think it's great. I only wish that I had that same awareness in my time. Yeah. So to reach this group, we aim to ensure that we are part of their everyday lives. We want to be there when they are paying their bills, buying their insurance, arranging their transport, making decisions about the environment. And for us, this means partnering with other financial and even non-financial entities and becoming a very core part of a young person's digital ecosystem. The third dynamic is that of quality service. There's now no doubt, with all this digital exposure, that people are demanding what I feel digital grade service quality in all aspects of their lives, and asset management is no different. This means that our digital investment platforms are not just about being able to invest virtually, it is also to give people the same digital experience that they receive from their favorite e-commerce sites, social media apps, that is intuitive to use, regular engagement, transparency, and personalization.
So Boon Kiat, currently portfolio managers look at various indicators to structure their funds positioning. So from your perspective, does UOB AM also implement digital solutions, I think, when it comes to investment decisions?
Again, the short answer to you, Tiang, is yes. For sure, we are doing that.
Yeah.
I'm
Maybe tell us more. Yeah.
Okay, sure. More than happy to unveil a little bit of UOB Asset Management. I'm personally a very huge believer in using technology, but intelligently, to make the process of investing more effective. And given, like you alluded to, the advances made in the last decade in algorithm development, artificial intelligence, big data, it was for me very imperative for me and my colleagues at UOBM to look into the potential offered by these new technologies, but in a very careful and considered way. So back in, I think it was around 2020, we embarked on an exercise to develop a human plus machine approach using AI/ML, that's artificial intelligence and machine learning. And this was based on actually mining data from over 25,000 stocks in Asia. We created our own proprietary AI model, and very importantly, combined this with the expertise of our regional network of investment analysts, which number almost 100. So, and what we did was we back-tested, fine-tuned, and we have actually implemented the process over the course of the past few years. And we have actually now very good evidence that our AI-enhanced approach, if you would, has given us the best of both worlds. And the lesson learned, and for me, there are two key advantages in this human-machine approach. The first is that it enables us to expand our coverage of our investment universe to the entire universe, if you would, cover any blind spots that we may have had previously. The second benefit is that we can now make much more objective assessments and in a sense take the emotion out of investing. Emotion is always our biggest weakness, I feel. But having said all that and all things technology, I really want to stress that our investment managers continue to play a very key role in this entire process. Just that now it is much more focused, much more value added and more efficient, I feel. Humans are the ones that will continue to enhance the design of the model and have very important inputs to the model, for example, in our stock recommendations and in our ESG ratings. So to come one full circle, there's very little doubt in my mind that this human plus machine approach is the way ahead for the asset management industry.
Yeah, I agree. I think human and machine is probably the way to go. We've seen that trend, I think, emerging in all, in all areas with the asset management industry. So Kevin, I think with the emergence of non-traditional players in digital banks, right? Do you see tomorrow in well positioned, with these new entrants?
Well, Chang, I would answer this way, right? At UOB, over the last 5 years from 2016 to 2021, UOB invested a total of 2.6 billion Singapore dollars in our technology investments. And typically for a bank, right, it would be about, you talk about 15% of our, 15 to 17% of our total expenses. This is something that's actually increased quite a lot in the last 5 to 10 years. It used to be in the low teens, now it's gone up to the higher teens. And besides just the investment in dollars, right, on the hardware and the software, I talk about the other aspects of the software as well, which is the culture and the mindset. So for UOB, just like many other banks out there, we saw the rise of this new digital entrants, right, really significantly picking up from around 2016, about 5-6 years ago, when previously, regulators used to look at consolidating bank licenses, but that narrative seems to have changed, that new licenses are going to be given out. And for those of you who are outside of Singapore, if you don't know yet, there's been 4 new digital bank licenses that's been given out. And these licenses were given out at the end of 2020, and we expect them to start operating right about now in the second quarter of 2022. Along with that, you also have new digital bank license given out in Malaysia soon, and across the region in Southeast Asia, many new digital players, not traditional from banks. You have people from the transportation companies, from the e-commerce companies, from telcos, all coming in and wanting a share of the pie. So this basically requires the bank to really take the competition very seriously. And UOB, we set up this Tomorrow Digital Group, which is a separate strategic business division across all our 5 key markets with the head office in Singapore. And we're trying to build one regional app to cover our key markets in Southeast Asia. But importantly, I think the whole mindset, right, is centered around the digital experience. It's not just about taking our existing bank products and making it digital, but rather looking this needs of the customers, right, as our guiding principle, and then designing our customer journeys around their needs. So, long answer, I would think that yes, we are not taking the competition lightly. We are ready for the competition.
Oh, I like that. Bring it on. Very good.
Bring it on.
Oh, very good. Excellent. Very good answer, Kevin. So I think, given the challenges that we have, I think you alluded to earlier, Kevin, in regards to the pandemic and how it has changed, the way we operated. So Boon Kiat, the face-to-face meetings as well as, were quite critical in winning mandates, winning new business opportunities and, acquiring new AUM. With the pandemic, and some of these uneven implementation of, border restrictions across the globe, are you seeing or adopting any changes, I think, in your business to overcome this challenge?
This is a very timely question given that I just opened up yesterday, right?
Yes.
So we're all very happy here that we
Party
can
at
finally
10:30.
travel and have face-to-face meeting. But beyond that, I really feel quite strongly, Chiang, that the pandemic has really changed our approach to business in very fundamental ways. And whilst I still very strongly believe that face-to-face meetings are still very, very important, the experience we have had, and I do see going forward that digital channels will increasingly become very important and complementary, I would add, to the entire client experience. And certainly, in my mind, they will continue to play a role even after the travel restrictions are lifted next week, is it?
29th of March.
29th, okay. I can't wait for that.
Yeah.
But indeed, I think today's event is actually a very good illustration
Timely.
of an effective use of technology to really effectively reach out to in an engaging way to a much broader audience across the world.
Yeah.
And coming back to digital channels, for me, it is certainly not an inferior way to interact with clients. And on the contrary, actually, they provide us a way to enhance and upgrade our client service and experience. And just taking an example, you mentioned about face-to-face meetings. Unlike in the past when our managers were only manage a few client meetings, maybe a month, because of the need to travel and everything that takes up a lot of time. We can now schedule much more this virtual access to our clients, our investors on a much more regular basis. As a result, and this little crisis that we have had in the past few months has shown it, our managers can much more quickly answer and react to any questions and any concerns that our investors may have, no matter where they are located. So, and therefore, as an extension, for me, face-to-face meetings can now allow for much more meaningful and personal engagements and interactions beyond just simple reporting. So I think that there's a lot more value add in face-to-face. You can put aside the sort of the more humdrum kind of interactions and get to know your clients better also.
Yeah. So I think, Kevin, you have also alluded to the fact that COVID has become one of the biggest change manager, I think, in this era,
absolutely.
right? I think in how it transformed the digital agenda. And definitely, I think for us, it is like what you said, Boon Kiat, it is a whole new opportunity as to how we rethink client engagement.
Yeah.
So, okay, so Kevin, tell us, do you see any opportunities in the unbanked and underbanked markets within the ASEAN, neighboring countries? And, how is UOB, or how should banks actually monetize this?
Yeah. Definitely, we see opportunities. Your first question to me just now was, do we see threats coming from the new digital entrants, right? But the digital event happening, right, is actually both an opportunity and a threat at the same time, right? The threats coming in terms of new forms of competition, but the opportunities are equally, if not larger, especially for us across ASEAN. Previously, the rate that we can grow our customer base, right, was quite limited by our network, our branches, and our people, the headcount across ASEAN. But in this new digital age, right, for example, in Indonesia right now, we are able to open a banking account for our customers across the entire Indonesia, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, okay? And that account opening process, right now, we call it the happy flow. It means that when everything is happening smoothly, 7 minutes, we can actually open a bank account for our customers. And we do it through a video KYC. Because in banking, you understand that we also have to fulfill, know our customers' requirements. But all of this actually have been packaged together, meeting the needs of each of the country's requirements. So in Indonesia, it's slightly different from, let's say, Thailand. Thailand is doing a type of blockchain they call NDID, National Digital Identity. But likewise, you're also able to open an account virtually. Singapore uses the MyInfo, right? Malaysia is more on the facial recognition, and so likely Vietnam will be as well. But all these different technologies and the new regulation allows us to reach out to customers that are spread out by geography that previously were not able to reach. And beyond that, also the cost to serve our customers actually comes down dramatically. So therein your point, there is a group of customers in typically what we call the near prime. Now this is something that it's still very much a challenge out there because when people talk about digital banking, going to the unbanked and the unserved, right? UOB, our perspective on this take is that we prefer to look at this as what we call the near prime, right? Because we understand from a banker's perspective, right, there's a risk-return continuum, right? So our approach always is we have responsibility when we look at the customers we serve, not just to the people who are borrowing money from the bank, but also to the depositors. We make sure that the bank is stable. Hence, our strategy on this unserved segment is to look for the group of customers that we call near prime and have upward mobility to join a group of people where eventually they will emerge into the middle class. So that's a segment that we think across ASEAN, somebody, in fact, just this morning we're debating this number, calling it 62 million across ASEAN. I said probably we need to calibrate that a little bit, right? The group of customers that basically today have bank accounts but no access to credit is total 62 million. But of that group, how much of it can we actually realistically be able to serve and be able to bring to the next level? And these are all public information I can share with you, Boon Kiat, this full disclosure. The bank has about 5 million customers in total, right? UOB group across our markets. And we're hoping to double that to 10 million customers within the next 5 years. And this is, I think, made slightly easier by the fact that recently UOB, we acquired the Citibank franchise in ASEAN. For the Singaporeans who are away, who may not have heard, UOB Group has purchased Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, and Indonesia Citibank consumer franchise, and this is being integrated to UOB. That brings along about sadly 2.5 million customers. Adding on to our 5 million, we're about halfway there to our 10 million. But another 2.5 million to get to 10 million. I think if I say that there's an opportunity of 62 million across Southeast Asia, it should be something that is not unreasonable for us to target for, provided we have the right platform, the right processes, and also the right mindset to capture and to serve this particular group of customers.
I'll be watching that KPI, Kevin. I'll be
Probably
watching
give
it
him a higher
closely.
KPI.
Okay, so now the interesting question for you, Boon Kiat. With the rise of digital assets, such as cryptocurrencies, how has this affected asset managers, I think, or at least your portfolio managers in any instance, in general, near to medium term approach in adopting this as an asset class?
That's been your burning question for,
Of course,
for days, right?
absolutely.
So you really need to know that. So I'll give you my take on it. First of all, I really feel that blockchain is definitely a part of the future of financial services, and I'm a very strong believer that it will play a very meaningful role in the future financial landscape. For cryptos, though, I think it's perhaps just a little early at this point for mainstream investors, managers like ourselves, to incorporate into our clients' portfolios in a very meaningful way for a few reasons. First of all, there's still a lack of understanding amongst medium and long-term investors, put aside the traders, about the drivers of cryptocurrency markets, what returns are possible, what risks are involved. And the empirical evidence is as such. We're not really seeing much, any strong insistence from our clients to include cryptocurrencies into their portfolios or even as a standalone investment opportunity. The second point is, I think, very important. We spoke about this previously offline, that the regulatory frameworks and operational processes are still not very well established at this moment. They are still fairly nascent. Everybody is sort of, I see many countries sort of taking a position on cryptos and what it means. So from that point of view, if you extended it to consumer and investor interest, then you've got to be a bit more careful. But as an extension, again, if and when these frameworks come out, I think that could be a eureka moment, if you would, right? That will make you happy. And thirdly, speaking as an investment purist, as we have seen in the most recent market sell downs, cryptos have not really helped diversify portfolio risks. What we have seen has been that cryptos have actually more or less moved in the same direction as the equity markets, albeit in the short term. And this rather negates one of the main reasons for including cryptos in conventional portfolios, that is to achieve greater diversification and in the longer term as a store of value. But all that said, I'm still keeping a close eye on developments in this space, and I would certainly encourage the audience here to also do so. I think it is it could be the next big thing. I don't know, right? Or it could be the tulip of our generation. I don't know, right? Yeah. In fact, full disclosure, I invest in quite a few cryptos myself. And it's more to get a feel of the pulse of the market, what's happening in it. So I am invested in it, but my only advice in this respect is to really invest only what you can afford to lose, i.e. your pocket change and everything.
Yeah, I think the general lack of knowledge is probably one key challenge in terms of this asset class at this point in time. So over to you, Kevin. Traditionally, we have banks, acting as middlemen, right? Connecting, like you mentioned earlier, those who have money to those who need it, right? So with the rise of all these digital solutions, right? You mentioned earlier as well, mobile payments, blockchain technology. This whole middleman role is being challenged, or if not, at a lower cost. So how do banks actually continue to stay relevant and continue to offer your services accordingly? And what do they need to do, to pivot themselves?
Now, Jane, this is a question that's been asked of banks, right? Especially, the last few years when you see disruption in many different industries, right? I can tell you that this is a question and topic that is thought very deeply within the management of a company like UOB. We will all remember the Kodak moment, right? That you have albums and you look at all your old films and everything, right? And it was something that struck at the heart of a lot of the senior management, right? When we say, do not be caught with a Kodak moment, right? And the Kodak moment was, Kodak actually, as we know it, had all the digital photography technology, but yet they were the ones, that basically somehow could not develop it, and somebody had taken that, and the rest we know is history. Kodak is not around anymore in the way it used to be, right? Hence, this whole challenge of digital to the so-called the middleman role of banking is something that banks look at very deeply, and at UOB we see that at the core of this, right, it's not just about arbitraging one side of the balance sheet with the other, but the essence of trust that we're building. Now, going a bit technical to explain finance, right? The banking system that we have is actually a leverage system. Customers' deposits on one side, the shareholder funds, the bondholder funds on one side of the balance sheet, is not there, all the time for customers to come back, and we don't keep all the money in the safe at the same time. It's lent out, it's leveraged so that it's be able to generate a higher return. And we need to keep confidence in that system. When there's no confidence, everybody comes back and asks for their money. That's what we call a bank run, right? And we saw, when systemic risk arises in the system, how it can be interrelated, and you create this label called DSIPs, or what we call systematically important banks within a financial system. Every major regulator around the world already have this concept of a DSIP, right? And obviously UOB, being such a key position in Singapore, we are a DSIP bank in Singapore and in many of the other markets that we operate. So we need to understand that building this trust and keeping this position of trust, right, is something that's very critical. So even as we are looking at blockchain technology, we're looking at digitizing our customer engagement journey, we're bringing agile into the way which we develop our software, we're putting the customer at the center of all our customer journeys, right? Just some recent reminders for us, right? If those, again, an update for people who have not been in Singapore recently, the hot topic in banking since late last year to early this year has been scams. We've been hit by a bout of scams, right? SMS scams, and people have lost some serious money. People have lost their life savings because somehow that trust that we have perhaps is too high, right? And we followed some of these instructions and we gave away passwords or the processes when we swung too much one way to make things very convenient, thinking that this is just a matter of pure customer experience. Now having to backtrack and put in friction is something that we have learned that we should avoid. We should consider the end-to-end journey, convenience together with the security. The kind of seamless and frictionless engagement with the customers, but at the same time, prudence and caution, right? So when we put these two together, I think the bank's position is traditional banks like UOB needs to transform, which is what the role of tomorrow is, to be a change agent for the bank. But at the same time, that balance actually is very important, right? Not to jump on the bandwagon and say, now it's all about this new technology, everything is all swinging. Remember, you still have a lot of customers that we need to move together with them. So I think at UOB, our position is that we need to monitor this space very closely, put in significant investments, make sure that we are keeping in track and are moving along together with the new technology, but at the same time, not leave other customers behind and be able to move together in appropriate pace that the industry should be moving at, rather than running too fast or running too slowly.
Wow, that's really insightful.
If I can just add on a little bit to what Kevin said, because it's something I believe in. It's a bit back to basics. I mean, you talk about blockchain and everything, and therefore the term disintermediation comes about. It's actually good for people like me because I can go direct to my clients, right? But the point Kevin made, which I share very passionately,
Yeah.
is it's about trust. At the end of the day, you can disintermediate everything, but you still need to trust. There are certain things that you need more trust than others. Like consumer goods, maybe trust is less of an issue, but when you talk about life savings, like Kevin alluded to, I think something along the entire value chain needs to establish that value of trust. So I feel disintermediation, like Kevin says, the truth is probably somewhere in between also.
But having said that, I think the part about banking having to transform, having to change is really a given,
correct,
right?
yeah.
And we're seeing a future whereby now we call Web 3.0, distributed finance or embedded finance, meaning that financial products, financial services will no longer be like our previous generation where we go to a branch, you talk to RM, but rather you'll be embedded into the products that you buy, the insurance that you purchase are on bite sizes. All of these things is looking to change in the next 5 to 10 years. And UOB is very much looking for opportunity, right, whereby we can be embedded into the lives of the customers seamlessly.
Okay, thank you very much, Boon Kiat and Kevin, for the insights to UOB digital transformation journey. So for all our excited audience, we're just going to make sure that you don't forget to participate, interactively with our show by asking any of your burning questions via the pigeonhole. So just please scan the QR code that appears on screen and head over to the pigeonhole and enter the passcode 2503. Okay, so let me just span the next segment, of today's event addressing any of the members' question. Now, one of the first questions that we have is pertaining to my personal journey and professional journey that I had. So by way of background, I spent 2 decades of my career in banking on both global markets and private banking, Singapore, Hong Kong, and Shanghai, mainly with a few major financial institutions. I'm currently the co-founder, COO of UOB Capital, a New York and Singapore-based enterprise SaaS, startup company. We have been away collectively for around 11 years, 8 in Hong Kong, 3 in Singapore. And we relocated as a family, in both locations, and I was the trailing spouse. So with COVID restrictions, with COVID travel restrictions, as well as some of the quarantine requirements, we took the leap of faith sometime last year and decided to return to Singapore. Now, friends in my network then encouraged me to explore the fintech segment. And I got pretty curious and turbocharged my knowledge, acquired new skills, through reading, attending webinars, and also formal training sessions, and did a whole lot of volunteer. Now, around, I would say, summer last year or late summer last year, I reconnected with the CEO of UOB Capital, Carl, whom I met in Shanghai, Morgan Stanley, 10 years ago. He spoke with me about the product vision and also to provide institutional investors with a digital assets and risk analytics and portfolio management platform. We also discussed about the establishment of Singapore, and I also met, the other co-founder, Ilya. And the rest was history. We together, as a co-founding team, came together to found UOB. Now, looking back, I would just say, a couple of things. One is find your purpose and your calling, maintain a spirit of adventure, stay open to opportunities and network, and build one brick at a time. Now, with that, I'm just going to turn to the next question, I think, for today. So, Kevin, Web3, decentralized tokenization, blockchain, and metaverse. Do you think the banking industry is ready for this?
Very deep words.
You can spend 1 hour talking about it.
Every one topic there will take a long time. All these the last one was on metaverse, right? Recently, I think HSBC made some public announcement of their initiative into the metaverse, right? The honest answer I would give that I don't think the banking industry is fully ready to get into all of these things yet. But if you look at that chain of things that we're talking about from Web 3.0, basically it means that it's a distributed, it's no longer centralized control, right? And to what we call that extension into finance, DeFi, distributed finance, I think that portion is probably more ready. Banks are really already quite aware about this coming future, not long from now, where, as you said, the banking services are embedded in the lives of the customers. I our best example in Southeast Asia probably would be Bank Jago, right? People might have heard of it in Indonesia. But Jerry Ng, a friend I know in Indonesia when I was there, right? He started this Bank Jago only about, I think, about 2 years ago. And they merged, or rather they sold a big portion of their bank to Gojek Tokopedia, right? And very quickly they were able to embed themselves, right? That actually is the first real good example within Southeast Asia that we see of this future of finance already happening, right? Now, whether they will get to the metaverse and blockchain, I think remain yet to be seen. But we see similar such examples in whether it's in Kakao, right? A Kakao Bank in Korea, or WeChat, a WeBank in China, right? But those are things that we are quite getting a clear picture and signal that banks have to be in the lives of the customers and around the lives of customers, and not the other way around, right? However, on the metaverse, right now we do hear companies are buying up land in the new metaverse land, right? And are doing a lot of investments and all that. So I guess that one, you probably have to look at it, see whether are we prepared to put all the money there, right? And see what happens, because this is in banking, right? Say land banking is something that we don't finance, right? So perhaps on the spectrum, those that are probably within 3 to 5 years nearby, banks are ready to go into it and really commercialize. But the very far out, it's something that we're still monitoring.
You know, if I can add a little bit to what Kevin said from just maybe the asset management point of view, in regard to all this alphabet soup of technologies that we are seeing, right? What is more clear and present in my experience is that I think blockchain, like I mentioned, is here to stay. You can already embed it in operational processes and everything and use it very effectively. Tokenization is something that we are certainly exploring, and I think it's going to come about sooner than later. The issue of the metaverse is probably the more interesting one. I mean, I did share this with Kevin. I can imagine this a possibility that one day you can open a virtual tomorrow in Decentraland or something like that in one of the virtual metaverse spaces, and next to an LV store, and you can actually do a lot of transactions in a virtual space. So I think that there's some possibility there, but you've got to stretch your imagination a little bit. So yeah, it's still unbounded and still very early days yet, for sure.
Okay. Just a quick reminder, all participants, please scan the QR code if you have any questions. Love to hear from you. Any Q&A, burning questions you might have for Boon, Kiat or Kevin. I'm sure they're ready to take on the challenge. Okay. Very good. Next question. Boon, Kiat. Given the current geopolitical situation and the inflationary pressures, how would it impact the investment teams that you have recently formulated?
That's from the future to the present. Not so exciting, but I'll give a stab at it. For UOB Asset Management, we started this year based on this conviction that we are entering a mid-cycle expansion phase, and this would be marked by some key factors like rising interest rates, moderating growth. And as such, our position then was to favor value sector equities, high-grade corporate bonds, and quite importantly, from our point of view, we also saw a lot of value in Asia and especially ASEAN markets, especially because of the fact that we're generally recovering well from COVID supply chain issues. As an extension, we also increased our focus on alternative asset classes such as commodities and real assets and real estate, for example, right? More recently, in the run-up to this Russia-Ukraine crisis, our qualitative and importantly, we spoke about technology, our quantitative indicators started to show unacceptably high levels of volatility. So this caused us, at least in the near term, to prioritize risk management and de-risk some parts of our portfolio. But if you ask me, just looking ahead beyond the very short term, because no one knows what's going to happen, and I don't want to downplay the humanitarian crisis that's happening in Ukraine now. The fundamental premise of our original thesis has definitely not changed, and to me it's still relevant, but perhaps altered somewhat at the margin as a result of the crisis that we are seeing. Specifically, we are continuing to watch both company earnings and growth prospects very closely to start to find a time to renormalize our portfolios. But bearing in mind the backdrop of inflation, rising rates, moderating growth will still be a fundamental impact even after this war is over, hopefully soon. Yeah.
Okay, let's just move on. Okay, we have the next question coming in. So were there any challenges, I think, across UOB and UOB Asset Management in cultivating a digital, culture? I think you alluded to that earlier, in terms of the
Challenges,
experience.
Phuket, I'm sure we have.
We could talk another 2 hours on challenges. Well, you start first, Kevin.
Yeah.
All yours.
Certainly there are a lot of challenges, right? But I will paint the story this way, that 5-6 years ago when UOB Group saw the challenge of digital disruption coming upon the banking industry. That's the first challenge. You've got to recognize that there is such a challenge, right? What the response of the UOB Group was to set up a separate strategic business division, right? And run a separate standalone digital bank, right? We call it Tomorrow. So that was something that first is recognizing the challenge, not internally but externally, that was coming, and putting significant resources and giving significant attention. Make sure that we are well prepared and equipped to take on these challenges coming from outside the industry. I think now we fast forward 5 years later, I think UOB is in a ready position. You asked me, are we ready for digital company? I think we are ready. We're not taking it lightly, but we are ready because I think we have built a culture within the Tomorrow Digital Group. And last year, with the merging a set of our target market for the younger professionals and the more mature segment into one, we are now tasked to bring this digital culture into the rest of the bank. Now, that itself is a challenge as well. So, but it's helpful that in the Tomorrow Digital Group that we have right now, today, all my Tomorrow colleagues, there's about 200 of us across the region. More than half of them are not Singaporeans.
Wow.
Yeah. And we have people, whether they are all over from Southeast Asia, that's needless to say, but we have people from Australia, from Hong Kong, from China, from Korea, from Spain, right, from Finland, from UK,
United
from
Nations.
US.
Wow.
Yeah, we have a lot of very diverse people. So that group that we have, right, is something that UOB has invested and brought in talent from all different parts of the world. And that brings a very global perspective, a very diverse perspective. And we really go back to the point that says, bring the best talent, bring the best of what we have, and look at how we create something that is truly differentiated. And I think I would be amiss if I don't share this with you. Our vision at the Tomorrow Digital Bank is to be the world's most engaging digital bank. And if you want to be the world's most engaging digital bank, surely it will have to come up and face a lot of challenges, both internally and externally. But I would say in the last few years, one key metric that we follow is what we call our Net Promoter Score. Simply explained is like you're on a scale of 1 to 10, people who give you 8, 9, 10, you minus the people who give you 1, 2, 3, up to 6. Okay? 7, 8 is just neutral. But you take these two bands, the people who are advocates minus the people who are what you call the not positive people, you minus the two scores, and you need to get the net score. So our UOB Tomorrow scores are actually in the 50s to the 60s in the two markets that we're operating in. And that is actually a very high score, right? Which means that the customers that we serve are really giving us that kind of endorsement, that kind of affirmation that we're doing right by them, and they are actually supporting us.
Almost
so
like Amazon.
I mean, Amazon is a company that we
aspire to, right?
Aspire and we admire. Right? We learn from them. So this is something that we hope to bring across all our markets as well.
Sure. Anything to add? I think.
Yeah,
Challenges.
No, I'll be a bit philosophical here, and come to the what is digital culture, right? And I think there are two words here. For me, digital is a means to an end. It's just a tool at the end of it. And when we talk about digital culture, it is to me using the digital to serve your stakeholders, to engage your stakeholders and your customers better. That's all it is, just a tool. And if you unpack this a little bit, what is in this digital tool? There's the hardware and there's the software. The hardware is what Kevin will do to spending how many $1 billion on all the technology. But just as he admits also, it's just not enough. The software is equally, if not more important. It's about the people. And for me, the challenge, other than the hardware part, but that to me is the easier challenge, just evolving with it. The software, i.e. the people, or what you term the culture, is about the skill set and maybe the mindset, right? And what they are. So you, in my case at least, Kevin is maybe a little bit more fortunate. He could get the United Nations behind him. I had to work with the incumbents, so to speak, right? So it is about equipping them with the skills, upgrading them in new areas, and whether it be learning Python programming or learn about ESG, data analytics. So there's a skill part that is one part. The second part is about the mindset, so that they must want to do it. And I think there are certain attributes which I want to share maybe with the audience here. The attributes I think you need to succeed in a digital environment, if there's such a word, is that of adaptability. You need agility. I think you need a lot of curiosity. You mentioned that yourself, right? And importantly, the ability and the want to actually thrive in ambiguity, because we are all venturing into the unknown. Right. So there are no. I mean, Kevin is much more challenging. I mean, he's going to the brave new world. You see, so you have to thrive in ambiguity.
I would
right?
add and build on Boon Kiat's point, right? Yeah. Digital is just a way of delivering a service.
Yep.
Now I think we come after 5 years of journey of doing this, right? To realize that customers may not want a digital bank. They want a better bank, right? Yeah. Whether it's digital or physical, make sure that you give things to me. If digital delivers the service to me more conveniently, then we have to be digital. But if there's some things that needs to be able to be properly hand off, right, to somebody physical, then we must make sure that we can deliver that to the customers as well. The key come back to the point is there's a certain amount of trust that we must make sure that we continuously protect and we keep, right? And not to be overly caught up with this idea that it's just about disrupting, it's just about digital, but put the customer at the center of what we're trying to do.
Put the customer in the center of what you're trying to do. Very good. Excellent. Okay. Any more questions that we have? Maybe one more question we have from the audience. You built a really successful career, at UOB Asset Management, and also yourself, Kevin, at UOB. Any sound bites from the audience, I think, of how you got there?
Very successful, I don't know, but I'll just answer because it's 3 decades, right? I'll take it first and then I'll head off to Kevin. I'll, at least from my point, I'll answer it from 2 perspectives, my career and maybe share some advice on investing. From a career perspective, I could also sum it in one word: passion. You mentioned it yourself, Jiang, so I think passion is very important. What has driven me really has been a very deep passion for what I do. I've always been passionate about investing ever since I was in college and university. So when I first started out in investments, especially at UOBAM, I always wondered why I was even paid to do this job. I really enjoyed it. I could have done it for free. Maybe not now.
Can you please tell the boss?
The boss is probably listening, right? But as I progress, I think having a passion to continue to grow and to develop personally and professionally, and coupled with this passion to make a difference in people's lives, whether it be my colleagues, our investors, the community and society in which we exist, that has continued to drive me. So also passion from a career point of view. For investing, maybe my advice to all is really to get started early. Kevin again spoke about 20 and 30-year-old. I think it's important to get started early. And if there's one thing, always remember this: time in the market is more important than timing the markets. Take a long-term view. Don't be lazy like me. Get invested early and sensibly. I think it will stand a person in good stead over the long run. Because once your finances are well taken care of, you can really then focus on the things that really matter to you in life, whether it be your family or otherwise. Yeah. Kevin? Your turn.
Okay, Mookie gave a very powerful one-word answer: passion, right?
Yeah, passion.
Yeah. Maybe for me, I would say for me, over the last 17 years in UOB, and prior to that, I worked for a couple of international banks overseas as well. It really have to be a place whereby there's purpose. So let me complement your passion with a purpose.
Great.
That what we are doing is, because work right now is very consuming. It takes up a lot of time, takes up a lot of energy. It's not kind of like a 9 to 5, right? Because at this kind of responsibility, it asks a lot of us, right? So if the work that we're doing does not bring the purpose of what we are trying to achieve for our customers, I think there will be quite difficult to sustain that kind of energy level. So purposeful, something that we know that we are impacting the lives of our customers, impacting the lives of our colleagues that we're working with. That's what keeps me going.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, I think we might have time for one last question. Okay, let me take a look. So what is the most important consideration when developing a digital customer journey these days?
So maybe I can start.
Yeah, you can start. Yeah, sure.
Okay, this is a very technical question. It looks like this person is in the trade, right? Yeah. Most important consideration, I think we now call it a discovery process, and to get the whole design approach correct first. So rather than we jump in and straight away we try and come up with a business case, or get set of user requirements to the software people to develop, right? The most important consideration, I would think, that is a good discovery process. Discovery is slightly different from research. Research is a component of discovery, but this discovery process, I mean, this is something I learned in the last 18 months also, right? Working with this group of people, it's from all around the world, and we resemble people from many different industries, right? There's a very deep desire to understand the customer's needs and the business needs, to be able to try and join these two dots, right? Conceptually, visually, to be able to draw it out, mark it out, and then to have a debate internally and look at all the competition and all the other consideration, right? Regulation in our case is quite a big one. Once we have a good discovery process, that really helps in developing the customer journey. Because if you don't spend enough time, right, a lot of times it says, we're very impatient. Okay, I already know what we want. Okay, tomorrow let's go down to it. Okay, write the requirement and give the software people to start coding. You find it quite not long down the road, you didn't think of that, you didn't think of this, right? So I would really encourage, right, anybody in designing digital journey, spend a proper set of time with proper resources to do a discovery journey. And in our discovery approach, right, we have a design team that does that. It can be as short as a week, just 3 to 5 days to do a discovery journey. It can be as long as 3 months, a full 90 days. And you do what we call a deep ethnographic research, which in tomorrow's case, we actually did. We went to the countries, sat at the kitchen table of our customers, and understand their lives. Ask them to articulate what their dreams, their fears, their concerns, right? And then understand that before we design the journey.
Right.
I'll pretty much echo what Kevin says. And this is something I've learned along the way also when we evolved our digital app. It's about putting yourself in the customer's position, knowing what the customer wants, how the customer thinks, rather than what you have. I think our traditional approach is always that I've got this here and therefore I need to sell it to you, right? I'm so excited with it. But you only see it from your point of view. But I feel where we need to bridge the gap is really to take the customer's perspective, how they think, what they want. I think that there's a technical term for these jobs to be done. Right? Know that what job does the customer need to be done, and therefore you cater to that and design around it. And again, as an extension, be willing to be agile about it, to change along the way, because needs evolve, and you may not have gotten it right the first time. Right. So that's my perspective also. Always remember the customer. I think that's the most important.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, once again, thank you, Boon, Kiat and Kevin, for your time today and wonderful insights into UOB digital transformation journey. Excellent to have you today. And to all of you here, thank you for joining us today. Tell us what you think. Do scan the QR code and give us your feedback. With this, I would say stay safe and keep well. Thank you and good evening.
Thank you.